So let's imagine that this line represents your entire life. So we're going to start at 0 when you were born. And just to pick a number, we'll make it easy. We'll pick 100. It's probably a pretty cool goal to have. Try to live to 100. Obviously, not everybody has that goal, or maybe don't want to live that long. But keep the math easy. Let's say 100. And 100 is a pretty cool number to pick because in life insurance for a long time, that was the number, right? So if you made it past 100, you'd actually get paid out your life insurance because congratulations, you won the game of life. You now get the payout. You're still alive. But now, people have been living longer. They've extended that a little bit. But that was always the number for years, right? So 0 to 100. Not everybody wants to have a family. But for me, personally, I want to have a family. So just look at here. Just pick a random arbitrary area here. Obviously, it's not probably to scale perfectly. But you have this little area here, whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, whatever it is. And let's just say that that's an 18-year window, right? So you got an 18-year window there. That's, for one child's, birth until 18, right? They're an adult now. They could go to college. They might stay home. Who knows? Everybody's different. But just to keep the math easy, for each child you have it like about an 18-year window, that they're going to be living at home, give or take. So let's also dive into this little 18-year window here a little bit more, right? So, the first couple of years, we'll shave into that a little bit. Your children are at home still. They're not going to school yet. It doesn't really matter what your schedule is, right? You can have Tuesday, Wednesday off. You can work second shift. You can work first shift. Doesn't matter because the kids are going to be home whenever you get home, right? Where it really starts to shift a little bit is when they go to school, right? So in here, I'm going to kind of narrow this down to like a 10-year window, right? So in the middle of this, once they start school, you probably have around 10 years of the glory years, I guess you could call them, of when your children are home, they're with you all the time, they come home from school, it's like that just immaculate time of family time. Because beyond that 10-year mark, let's face it, right? They're starting to get in teenage years, they're going to want to start spending time with their friends, different things like that. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there watching this that's where their children are, or they've gone through that phase. My twins are still not in that phase yet, so I haven't gotten to those years yet, but that's what I'm anticipating it's going to be. But that's what I really want to focus on, is these 10 years, right? So let's just, because I want to keep the math easy, right? So you got 10 years. Which means you're getting 10 Christmases. All the holidays, you get 10, right? Then, 52 weeks in a year, 10 years. Let's do the math. Times 52. You get 520 weekends. My handwriting is terrible, I know that. So you got 520 weekends, you get 10 Christmases in those glory years. It doesn't mean that these other Christmases don't matter. And they're not still going to be fun. But this is where my life focus really, I started to hone in on the schedule and a family-friendly schedule and different things like that. And that's what has caused a lot of the shifts, in my life recently over the last few years. Just realizing that I only have a finite number of weekends, holidays. It really changed my entire mindset as far as what I wanted my schedule to be. And the other part of this is, you can even plan the math for 10 Christmases, 520 weekends. But life is not guaranteed, right? I mean, who said you're going to live, all this way to 100, right? Who says you're going to make it through this entire 18-year span, right? I mean, I'm trying to get all negative and depressing, but you don't know. You don't know what life's going to bring you. You know, you might only get through half of that. You might not even make it to that. You know, some people, unfortunately, you know, don't even make it to get to that. You know, and they don't even make it much past here. You know, and some people go beyond. So you just never know. All right, so let's get into the overall reason for this entire video. You know, and that's just the big shifts that have been going on, right? So those of you that have been following me, you know, you've probably seen like real estate, you've seen roofs, you've seen foundations, you've seen the in-home sales, you saw a little bit of sales trainer, and those of you that have been following me recently, you see now insurance is coming into the picture. So, you know, just kind of, I just wanted to bring some focus and some clarity into like, you know, what my focuses are now, what my mindset is, like what help I can do for you, you know, like what you should reach out to me for, like those kinds of things like that. Just kind of all tie it in together. So you just have a better understanding on the YouTube channel, you know, as far as the direction of that, and just kind of my journey, right, over the last couple of years, just to kind of see how things played out and how things, you know, evolved and turned into what it is now going forward. So there's 4 big shifts that I want to get into, you know, and I wouldn't even call them all big shifts. You know, some are just slight shifts, but I'll start off with real estate, right? So I was a full-time real estate agent, you know, and why did I transition out of being a full-time real estate agent, right? Without giving you the real long story, if I have to give you the short version, you know, finances, I guess is the easiest way to say how I first initially transitioned out of it, right? Because, you know, going in, it's 100% commission, you know, when I went all in, like every part of me was in that. And I put so much energy into that, but it took a lot of finances, not only to just sustain the bills, you know, but it was advertising, it was making signs and all these different things. So I knew I had just a finite, you know, number of, you know, months, you know, to get that up and running, you know, to be able to, you know, pay all the bills. So it got to a certain point where, you know, it wasn't, the numbers weren't adding up. You know, I wasn't generating the income that I needed to generate. So, you know, the bank account's getting lower. So you got to do something, right? So in the meantime of me, you know, learning about real estate, you know, I started learning about sales. You know, some people that were in my brokerage were big in the sales industry, and I started following them, and, you know, it just took me on this whole other journey, and I was excited about sales because that's also an industry to help people. But, you know, and the ones that I was looking at, you know, you would get appointments from the company, which, you know, that's the battle. Those of you in real estate, you know, you always have to have your customer flow and people coming in, and if you don't have that, you're not going to be doing it too long. So you know, I didn't have enough of that coming in, you know, for all the expenses. But anyway, so I got into in-home sales, which was great because I made sure I stayed in the home improvement industry because it was about homes and just building off that. I'm very big on building off of what I've already learned. So, you know, I did kitchens, learned all about kitchens. Then I did some roofs, learned all about roofs, what goes into a roof, what to look for. And then foundations, I got into that, looking at foundations and cracks and what that means. Is your house settling? You know, do you need to support it? All that different stuff. So that really all tied together good because when I looked at some houses after I had that knowledge, and it's like, what a difference. You know, I'd walk into the attic and boom, boom, boom. I see things, you know, with the attic, with the roof that you can see. You can just look at the roof, the foundation. I just knew so much more what to look for. So it was just building layers, you know, on top of it. So it was really nice because I really love homes and I love real estate. And I didn't want to get out of it full time. You know, like I wanted to do that. Like I really enjoy it. But it was just finances kind of pushed me into sales, which, you know, life has its reasons, you know. It forced me to grow and learn. But sales also made it really hard to do any real estate because the sales positions that I had were, you know, almost like an on-call thing. You don't get your appointment till the morning of, so you don't know what your schedule looks like, what appointments you're going to be pretty much available every day, you know, from morning until late at night. You know, sometimes I wasn't getting home until midnight. You know, sometimes I'm leaving at, you know, 7 in the morning, 7:30 to go past Boston. So you just never knew. So if you told me, hey, I need you to meet me at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, you know, look at a house, like I couldn't do it. I couldn't commit to that. So one thing is I want to make sure if I'm going to represent a client in real estate, like you're going to get, you know, what you need to get. So I got to be there, you know, when I need to be there. I got to put in the time and be able to do what I need to do. If I can't do that, I'm going to refer you to somebody else. I'm going to appreciate you coming to me, but that's just kind of how it was. So it was very difficult to keep doing the real estate. But then I came across another fundamental reason with real estate that I wasn't even realizing. Because in the in-home sales, there are positions where you can actually be a real estate agent. And they're going to give you, leads and customers and appointments. Obviously they take more of your paycheck and your commission because, they're giving you appointments, understandable. But that's when I started to realize that it wasn't just about the finances. It was actually it was about the schedule. And it kind of goes back to this, right? So in that opportunity that I had, it's like I had to be available again, like nights, weekends, and that's what brings it all back to life. So every job that I've had, I can go back to all of them, really. Because I've always known I've wanted to have a family. Weekends have always been important to me. Nights, obviously, you got to make a living. You have to have a career. You got to work all kinds of hours and different things depending on what you're doing. So I was fine with that because I have no problem putting the hours in, putting the work in. I like to build a career that I'm proud of. So that opportunity was really eye-opening because I wasn't like jumping at it. I was like, why not? I love real estate. Like I loved it, and I'm learning all the home improvement just goes with real estate. But like, why not? And it was this. I really wanted to have, weekends and nights, control over that. So that's when I came to the realization. So I wanted to be in an industry to help people, but I wanted to have some control. So that's what it's all about to me. Came down to control, right? So control. How much of your schedule can you control, especially during that time frame? Right? During this window, I want to have as much control as I can, over nights and weekends, right? So that's kind of what led to some shifts. But let's backtrack a little bit. I don't want to get too off track here. So I'm doing full-time real estate, slight shift into home improvement, builds upon the real estate. I'm doing all the sales. I had an opportunity, to go back to real estate, but stayed with the in-home sales for now because I realized that it was more about the schedule. So I was still doing the in-home sales because I had to obviously have a paycheck coming in, but it got me thinking, But the thing with the in-home sales, 100% commission, so it was that same, roller coaster ride, right? So, sometimes things are going great, sometimes things are going slow. It's about managing that money piece. So, but really what caused another shift, and then this hopefully bring a little clarity to some of the things that you saw last year, like with the sales trainer and sell this to your mom. And with sales, that's where, another little shift started to happen because in sales, all my life, right, I've been a consumer just like most of you, right? And I've been on the consumer end of sales and different things like that, right? And then when I got into real estate, I always looked at it from the client perspective, right? You're representing the client, you're trying to do what's best for them, trying to look through their eyes of what they want. And that's just been my mindset all the time, right? But in sales, what I learned once I was deep in it and going to appointments all the time and just learning and meeting different people in the whole industry and seeing how different organizations worked, is that mindset of the client first was just not always, the main objective of the appointment, right? So it really made my mind, I was trying to wrap my head around it because, that's how I always would conduct myself. But you would see, companies are, some, not all of them, but they're trying to sell a product to a customer, right? So they're trying to sell their product, and that's the point of the sale. So on some level, I understand. That's what they're trying to do. They're a business. They're trying to sell their product. But for me, I always had the client's perspective. Do I need this? Do I really want it? Is this the best thing for me? Is there something better out there? So that was always a little conflict I had going on. And I'm not saying everybody I met in sales or every organization is like this, but it just made me really see that, there's a big disconnect there with I feel like how the client should be treated and how you should try to help the client versus how some of these organizations do their sales process, right? Or, different things like that. So that's what inspired me, to write the book, Sell This to Your Mom. Probably saw last year, I said coming out this summer, but nothing came out, right? And there's a good reason for that, right? So I started writing the book, was really getting into it, because I'll tell you, with sales and business and all these different things, business owners and going into clients' houses, I learned, I can't even start to describe how much I studied, I learned, like reading books, listening to audio, just so much stuff, experience every day, all day, 6-7 days a week, going into people's homes, having conversations with homeowners, just, you learn so much during that time. You gain a lot of experience, even in a short amount of time, with those rigorous schedules. So I was learning so much, and that's always been a passion of mine. When I do self-reflecting, it's like, what drives me? It's like, I like to share what I've learned with people. I like to educate people, and going back to Walmart days or coaching day, whatever it is, I like to share, the information I have, because what good is it if it's up here and it just goes to the grave with me, right? I mean, it doesn't do anybody any good. So as much as I could share and educate people and help people, just makes me feel good about what I'm doing. So that's when I decided I wanted to write a book. So it was really for two reasons. One, it was like to try to help people that maybe, just kind of get off the track a little bit, where their goal is not to help the customer, right? So it's like, let's, just try to remind people, because doesn't mean they're a bad person. It's just, sometimes it's just the way it goes. You're just kind of going on that path, and it just leads to that, right? So it's just getting people to stop for a minute, kind of refocus, have this like sell this to your mom mentality. Like, is this how you would treat your mom? And that's kind of the basis of the book. I wouldn't say the whole basis. That's kind of almost a small part of it, but it's the overall philosophy of it. But, I also put in there just like all the things that I was learning that I would have loved just to have organized like that, and it sent me into this whole other way of looking at the decision making and just, I don't really want to get into it all here, but things that I've never seen anyone else teach in that way. So I was very excited to put that in a book and get that out there, right? So I was writing that book, for those reasons, to help the sales professionals, business owners, whoever, just get back on track. And here's all the tidbits I've learned along the way. And here's this other new system that, is just a really great way to look at it. But, I won't get into all that. But that was Sell This to Your Mom, right? So that also got me into the sales trainer, which is kind of the same motto. So I started that other channel. I started the other Instagram, sales trainer. But another shift happened, right? So I'm going down that journey, and then another shift. And what ended up happening, because I'm still studying, I'm writing the book, and I'm just getting all into it. I want to make sure that I have everything I want in this book. And that just leapfrogged. That took a shift, a big shift, into really the beginnings of the Dream Chaser Nation. So you've probably seen Dream Chaser Nation here and there. Like, what's that about? This is not the video for that, because there's a lot to get into with that. But that all kind of came from the sales trainer, Sell This to Your Mom, which was one book, which now is turning into a 5-book series that's not done yet. So I haven't, that first book, it was pretty much done by the summer. But because I'm now doing 5, it's like I also want to make sure, because they all kind of pertain to the overall starting point of that original book. So I just, I want to make sure by, go into depth on different things that it still all ties together good. So, it doesn't mean all 5 be released at the same time, but that's kind of the core of Dream Chaser Nation, is those 5 books are going to be the core of it. And it's just a whole mentality. It's just, that's people that I really am drawn to, right? People that are chasing their dreams, go get it mentality, take a chance, take a risk, like, go for it, right? You never know when this line's going to end. So just go for it, right? So, and you got to be smart about it, you can't just be totally reckless, but that's the kind of people that I want to help, the entrepreneurial spirit and different things like that. So I was doing so many things with that, with building out the website and just so many things. And I'm not going to get into all that, but I went deep, 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 like getting up 1 a.m, like, I don't even want to get into it, but it was crazy. It kind of took over. It was like a calling. I just got to get this done and get this stuff going. But obviously, real life, right? Because you also, you got to pay the bills, you got responsibilities. So that became the next shift, right? So, shifted from real estate full time. I've still always had my licenses. I never left real estate. Shifted into in-home sales, learn about the sales. That shifted into taking that knowledge and wanting to share it with people, into book and sales trainer. That shifted into a bigger picture, Dream Chaser Nation, bigger than me. Just, a nation of people, hopefully, that will hopefully see all this stuff one day, and hopefully it inspires them to go chase their dreams. But also, I got a house, got bills, so I had to shift, right? So that's where I take everything here, all the 10 Christmases and 10 years and all this stuff. What am I going to do, right? What can I do? I wanted to have a family-friendly schedule where I can have as much control. Doesn't mean I'm not going to work this time, but as much control over nights and weekends as possible, right? That's the ideal situation. I'm all about work ethic. I'm all about working. I'm not saying I just want to work, a simple job Monday through Friday, first shift, and not do anything else besides that. I don't think I could ever just do that. I'm always building and thinking of things and doing all these different things, but I want to have control over that. That's the key, right? That's how this all comes together. So that's where, my mind started going, okay, what can I do, right? So the thing with me is I don't like to waste time, right? It's probably not a good thing, I guess, in a way, because I don't like to just have wasted time. So I spent this, I can't even begin to describe to you, like, what that first summer was like building out the real estate, right? There was no Grand Bash this year, for those of you that know what a Grand Bash is, but didn't have one that year. Was out, in my office, just building everything up, designing logos, designing signs, business cards. I was doing everything from scratch, everything, learning, like, just even how to use Adobe, and, I didn't know any of that stuff, right? How to even make a YouTube video, didn't know any of that, right? So I'm building all that out, learning all that stuff, studying for all the tests, because I do Massachusetts. Something just wanted me to get those 3 licenses, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Florida. Huge passion for Florida. Who knows, maybe one day I'll move down there, I don't know. It's probably tough because I don't want to leave family and friends. That's kind of what keeps me up here. But love Florida, right? So that was always wanted to have Florida. So the Florida test alone was just that alone was way more rigorous than Massachusetts was. But just to do all that, the first 3 months of getting into real estate, I wasn't even ready for a client. I was just doing all that stuff, right? Like every day, all day. Like, you think working from home and doing that, you'd have more time with the family. I saw my family probably the least ever during those first 3 months of real estate. It was crazy. But anyway, I was doing all that, learning so much about houses and all these different things. And, I never wanted to just waste that. I just want to keep building on it. So that's why home improvement really attracted me. So I was just building on that. Just another layer upon layer upon layer. And, what can I do now that's going to also not get rid of that, And, like I said, I'm not one to cut my ties. In some ways, that's a bad thing, I think, because I think in certain situations, it is good to just cut ties and move on. But it's not me. I'm shifting, right? That's why the video is called The Shifts, right? And there's the big shifts, because that is what I was doing, is just shifting, right? So it's not a whole pivot. Okay, I'm not doing real estate anymore. Okay, I'm doing home stuff. No, it's not. It's just, it's morphing it all together, shifting the focuses, but still encompassing the overall big picture. So I'm trying to figure out family-friendly schedule. What is the number one family-friendly schedule? Let's get my marker. A bank, right? So that's where I started my search And I didn't have to search far because BayCoast Bank is right down the road from me. So that's where I decided to apply. So I wasn't really thinking, I always respected financial institutions, but never really thought about actually, going to work at a bank. But this was like, this would be kind of perfect, right? If I can get a family-friendly schedule, I can kind of still do some real estate if I need to, keep working on the Dream Chaser Nation, but also have a main career that will be based on helping people in like a, respectful professional environment, financial world, that all ties in and that helps everything, right? It all works together. So, went in, dropped off my application, didn't know what to expect, got a phone call, and I'm getting an interview for the insurance division, right? So I'm not an expert in insurance. I had it. I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know a ton about it. But that was a door that was open for me, right? Here's an opportunity to get into insurance. And so I started studying because you have to take a test. So, stipulation after the interview was like, hey, we can't hire you until you get your license, right? So right back to the license world like I was with real estate. So I start learning about insurance and man, I just started looking at insurance differently, right? So there's this one woman out there in internet land, insurance exam queen. So thank you if you're out there because, I know you're out there, but if you ever watch this, man, those videos, her information was just amazing, right? But she got me excited about insurance because insurance is a really cool thing that you can protect yourself with insurances and that they're going to take on the risk. And this isn't going to be a whole insurance video, so I don't want to get into all that. But it got me really excited about insurance. And then it really makes sense because especially like homeowners insurance ties into homes, these dream homes and then dream cars, auto insurance, right? So, you have these cars, you have these homes, they're your life dreams that you worked hard for all your life, and now this protects them, right? So it can kind of protect your assets. So it was a really good world to dive into and learn about, And then life insurance, I've always been an advocate for life insurance, forever. I've always signed up for it when I could at my work, different things like that. There's even more, programs out there and different policies, with whole life, and I won't get into all that stuff, but it's really cool. So, the thing with insurance to me, especially life insurance, I always felt it was such a great investment, like just amazing investment, like for the money you put in to the money you get as a benefit at the end for your family. It's just like, I don't care what you're putting in, like the money that you put in, it never equals the payout, right? So to me, it was just a no-brainer, like I always life insurance. Yeah, I want to protect the family, right? And I've been on the beneficiary end of insurance. So I've seen that side of it. And I'll tell you, it's such a, I don't know the right word to say with that because you're dealing with like a death of a loved one. But just to be able to get that little peace of mind, I guess, I don't know, probably a better way to say it. But, you get that benefit. And yeah, you would trade all that in to have your loved one back. But at the end of the day, you lost your loved one. So it's like, as much as you want them back, you don't have the control to get them back. But at least this is getting you something, to be able to pay for the service, give them a proper send-off, whatever you want to plan for it. It just makes it a lot easier at that time. And then, if you get a little something that can be some little shiny bit of positive news, it's just kind of, it's just a good benefit, and it really helps out. And then the person that, passes on, you can feel good in your life that that you're leaving it, you're leaving some benefit behind. But that was always life insurance. I was always drawn to it. Health insurance, I was always studying health insurance, like, and gosh, whenever I change jobs or change, new insurances come out, open enrollment, I was always that one studying health insurance. Where should I go? I ended up switching my whole network to Boston, which I've gotten into in other videos, so I won't get too much into that. But Boston, right in our backyard, it's like always rated at the top, in the whole country. It's always rated up there. And just having it right in the backyard, to me, that's where I moved a lot of my, doctors and different things, my network. But needless to say, it doesn't mean that they're better than local. So I always like to throw that in there, because the thing is, when you're rated at the top, that's, you become a training ground, right? So now you have a lot of students, you have a lot of inexperienced, medical students up there, and they end up doing a lot of the work, and they're being overseen, by, a doctor that's, established and well. But sometimes that maybe you are better off going to local, because you have somebody that's doing it all the time, doing experience. So it's like, it doesn't mean they're better. Local can be great. I just decided to go with the Boston. I just looked at it, from an overall perspective. Kind of made sense for me. I believed in the process overall of the, there's reasons why they were voted what they were. But again, I don't want to take away from local, because I've had really great local medical. But anyway, so back to the insurance. So I had to go get my license in property and casualty, which is pretty much, the homeowners, auto, a lot of other things that go into that. But those categories. So once I had that, I could actually start the position. So, study, learn everything I can. And the thing with Massachusetts is there's like 4 major lines. So it's property, casualty, life, and health. So I go and I take one test. I had to pass casualty and property to be accepted for that position. Pass the casualty, great, boom, right? So study, boom. Pass the property, right? Go take the state exam, boom. So now I'm in study mode. I'm like, okay, I've always loved life, like I just got into. So let's study for the life. Boom, pass the life. So I'm like, I might as well round it out, get all 4. And I got the health. So now I'm licensed property, casualty, life, health. Boom. It's still one license. It's just 4 lines of authority, right? So start the position. BayCoast Insurance. And that brings me to now. So what is the overall, what's going on? So there's all these different pieces. What's going on with the focus? Let's wrap this up with a nice little bow. So BayCoast Insurance, or insurance in general, that's my primary focus right now for my full-time career. So that's where I'm diving into. I'm learning all about that. I'm excited about it. The more I learn, there's so many things that I didn't know, right? So that's what I'm learning the most of, is like, I thought, okay, you're in an auto accident, you have auto insurance, boom, you're all set, you got car insurance, you're good. And that is just not the case. If you're not covered properly, you might be in a lot of trouble. Even some people, I'm already hearing some stories of like, they had high limits and they still wasn't enough. So there's a lot of stuff there. And what happens in a lot of worlds, and I was in this because I was a consumer. I just give me the lowest price, man. I need car insurance, give me car insurance. Like, I don't really care what's in it. Yeah, I want to have rental or things like that, but these limits, I didn't know what things cost with medical bills and lawsuits and stuff. But now that I'm getting into the world, I'm seeing, that there's a big difference, So I was falling into that trap too, and I would just go with the cheapest. And a lot of times, the insurance agents would just, because they want to just get that policy, they would just want to be the cheapest. So they just cut the coverages down to make it not that much money. And then people will be like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to go save X amount of my insurance, right? So you got to look at the big picture. That's what I'm learning. But anyway, let's wrap this up. Insurance, full-time, and that paves the way for all these other little things, right? So I still love real estate. That's one thing I love. I have a passion for. I don't know, my juices flow. It wasn't even that long ago. Maybe 2 months ago, somebody wanted me to look at their house, and man, it just comes back. As soon as I walk in the house, I love to just walk in the house, tour the house, look at the different little areas, and just see what someone could do with that space. Whether it's a porch, a deck, a room, a closet, just the yard. I love seeing that. Like, you could do this here, you could do that, or this, or that. That's why I love listing and advertising properties, because it's just, I love to see the good and just see it right away, So, my juice is, it's like, I don't want to totally not do real estate. So, yes, I just talked all about this and I want to have family time, but I don't want you to mistake that for, oh, don't call Paul. He doesn't want to help, or he wants to be with his family. Like, trust me, I like that gets me excited. Go walk through a house, give you guidance. Hey, you should do X, Y, Z. Get it ready. What do you need to get ready? Or you're looking for a house, whatever it is, right? So the shift is that's going to be very part-time-ish, right? So it's going to be exclusive, I guess you could say. So, 1, 2 people, max at a time, because I need to devote insurance. That needs to be like where my focus is. I want to make sure I'm helping everybody with that. So with real estate, I still want you to call me. Even if I have more people, I still want you to call me, because I have a network of other real estate agents that I can get you hooked up with a good one if you don't have one. And I could just answer questions if you just have questions on what you want to do, what you're thinking. It doesn't even have to be now. It could be, hey, 2 years from now I'm thinking of X, Y, Z. Reach out to me, I want you to reach out to me, But I understand people have their own agent. If you have your own agent, you've been working on it for years, you love them, hey, great, stay with your agent. I'm not trying to do that. Like I said, I'm only trying to help, a few people at a time anyway. But I can always help with questions. It's just when I say 1 to 2 people, I mean like, we're going house hunting, or, we're putting a house on the market. I want to make sure I give you what you deserve, and you deserve somebody that's going to be intently focused on that and passionate about it, and given the time that it needs to make sure that you're getting the most amount for your home, because that's your investment, and also finding the dream home, finding that right one. So that's why I had to kind of moderate that. And then Dream Chaser Nation, which I haven't talked a lot about, that's kind of where that sales trainer and sales to your mom just kind of turned into that whole path. There might be one person out there watching, if you're watching, that I've kind of given the whole picture to with Dream Chaser Nation. So I sat them down, I went through all the stuff. So I'm not ready to get into all that right now, but just know it's something fun, something exciting. And if you start to see sweatshirts and you want to get a sweatshirt, whatever it is. But it's not even about the sale, honestly. I just want to get the people to build the community, right? It's just Dream Chaser Nation and just getting that group of people, in a community together. So, but that's going to be cool and exciting. That's another passion project of mine that, is being worked on. But, right now, it's honestly the way it's set up. It couldn't be more aligned, right? Just to have this family-friendly schedule at a very professional institution where so far everyone there has been treating me excellent. I love it. So I'm so excited to work with them and represent them. But having that core, and then having real estate still be in the picture. And also knowing that I have a network that I can help you if for some reason you reach out to me and I just can't do it. Because that's one thing I'm not going to do. I'm going to tell you the truth, even if it's, not ideal. I'll say, look, I just can't do it right now. Like, I can't commit to you. And if I can, great. And even if I can't, like I said, I can guide you. I can answer questions, and I can get you, with somebody that can give you that full-time attention if that's what you need. So that's where I'm at. So Dream Chaser Nation, that'll be the passion. That's where you're going to see some stuff with some videos going. But you're also going to see a shift in this channel for insurance, right? So I have a ton of videos out there for real estate, and there's going to be more, but I've done market updates, hot towns, cold towns, Massachusetts. I mean, top places to eat, foundations, roofs, like going into the whole, gamut of things. And buyers tips, sellers tips, pretty much the whole process, the complete process, so you can see what the process is like, investment strategies. Like, there's a lot of stuff on here that I hope brings value to people. But now I want to add insurance. So insurance is going to have to do a little catch up. So that's where it's going to be focused. But obviously, these things take time to make these videos and stuff. So, the focus also is obviously got to be doing the actual job, right? So I'm going to try to make these videos when I can, but I want to try to get as much value out there as I can. So those are the shifts. Those are why. Hopefully you understand, the big picture, how it all came together. I appreciate your time so much. I know this video went on very long, but I was hoping just to kind of give you my personal insights as far as what was going on, what was happening, and also tie those loose ends up. You know, hey, what the heck happened to the bookers? Right? Hey, what happened to the sales trainer station? Like what's going on? So hopefully I brought some clarity. I know I didn't bring full clarity because I didn't get into a deep dive into Dream Chaser Nation, but as long as you understand the insurance and real estate, and kind of where that sales trainer, went to, you'll see, when I do start, announcing more things with Dream Chaser Nation, kind of more so what that's about. So anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Like always, reach out to me if you need anything. Other than that, have a great day. Thank you.